Hi everyone, it's Karen from Karen's Quilts, Crows and Cardinals blog and Redbird Quilt Co. here for another installment of our 2016 free motion quilt along. We're using the beautiful Lou's Balloons growth chart panel by Susie Bleasby for World of Susie B. And in an earlier installment of our tutorial, we actually quilted the bee and Lou and one of the clouds. And for the next installment, what I wanted to do was just share with you what I would do next after quilting those few items that we finished in the last installment. Some of you asked, how would you handle the clouds that are next to the black border? So what I'm going to tell you about this evening and today is where I would go next after I finished the things that were at the bottom of the panel, the bee, Lou, and the one cloud that we quilted in our previous installment. So I would come to the cloud that's closest to Lou, above and to the left of Lou, about at the 35-inch mark of our growth chart. And you'll notice that I flipped my quilt sandwich upside down so that I had less fabric to the right of the needle. That way I don't have to worry about crunching my fabric over there on the right. It'll fit right in. And that's one of the advantages of starting and learning with something smaller, is that you can flip the quilt sandwich around and not have too much bulk to worry about. So I flipped my quilt sandwich around, and I'm just going to show you I used a couple of tools here to give you another idea of how to stitch inside of the cloud. I know I mentioned that we were doing like a 1-inch echo quilting in there, but some of you indicated that maybe you stitched your cloud and you weren't quite happy with what you stitched. So one option is to actually use a marking tool on your quilt and go ahead and mark the line that you think looks pleasing to your eye. So I used this water erasable fabric marker pen. It's a blue pen that I learned about from Karen McTavish. And I marked, and you're not going to be able to probably see it on the video, but I'll put a still image on my blog. I marked an inside of the cloud with the blue pen, a nice fluffy cloud on the inside, about 1 inch or 2 inches in from the edge. And that can be my target. And when I use a water erasable or air erasable marker, if I don't like what I drew and what I've got defined to stitch on, then I can just erase it and start again before I stitch. And this is another tool that I learned about from Karen McTavish. It's a clover eraser pen, and basically I'll show you how it works when we're done, but basically it'll just, if you run right over the blue mark that you made, the blue mark will disappear in seconds, and it kind of gives you a feel for your stitching after you've completed it, and it takes the blue mark away. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch what we've got here so that you can see it, and I will also go ahead and move to the other side of the quilt and stitch the cloud that is on the other side of Lou and another cloud at the top. I'm not sure if we'll fit that all into this one video, but I wanted to show you how I tackle a cloud over here by the growth chart stitching. So let me just share one thing. When I start on the edge of the quilt where there's a ditch or a seam, I actually put my needle right down into that seam, and I'll use my flywheel, I'll use my hand wheel to actually make sure that the needle is going to drop right in the ditch. I'll put it down in there, and then I will use, holding the top thread of course, I'll take a single stitch and bring my bobbin thread to the top so that I can trim it flush later. For some reason I don't have my lanyard on tonight. Ill prepared. So I brought the bobbin thread up. I'm going to just draw it forward, and I'm going to make sure I take another stitch right in place, 1 or 2, to lock those stitches. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm going to tell my machine to put the needle down. And with the Janome Horizon, it's true with many other machines, not just this one. Every time I stop now, my needle will stop in the down position. So I'm going to put my handy dandy gloves on here, and I'm a little bit awkward with my video camera, so I hope that the quilt top doesn't get in your way. But I'm going to go ahead now and just stitch toward the growth chart markings. And I am, because I've already stitched the black line up the middle of this growth chart, I'm going to stop, and it really doesn't matter all that much, but I am going to stop, take a couple lock stitches, and jump over top of that. So let me just get started here. I'm going to outline the cloud, and I should have trimmed those threads away just so that they weren't confusing. I'm just going to trim what I can for right now. Okay, and now I'm right up at the edge of the growth chart black mark. I'm just going to take a stitch or two to lock my stitches, lift my needle and my presser foot, move across to the other side of the growth chart mark, needle down, a couple more stitches in place, and now I'm going to continue around the perimeter of this cloud as we did for the cloud that was in the lower right hand corner of the panel. So I'm going to stitch around the outside of the cloud and just outline it, removing pins as you need to. We're not going to fall into that trap that I did the last time where those pins got in my way. I'm following the beautiful gray markings around this cloud. There's really some really pretty shades of gray and blue that go around it. Just going to keep going here. Just checking my attention. Alright, now there's a nice little divot in here that's in gray, so I'm just going to follow that in and back out again. And then keep moving around the cloud. There's another little divot here in gray. I'm going to trace in with my foot. Back out again. And as we mentioned, we did not want to do dense quilting around the cloud because we want him to have some poof. So I'm up against the next growth chart mark. I'm going to take a couple lock stitches and jump across it again. And take a couple of lock stitches over there. And keep going. Just go over to the ditch and stop. Alright, now I think it's best that we do another little echo stitch in here. It's always good to give it just a little more dimension by doing 2 layers of stitching. So we're just going to move down a couple of stitches and kind of echo stitch that outline quilting that we just did. Since I don't have very far to move right here, I don't necessarily have to lift my the tension discs up, lift my foot up to move the tension discs. So let me go back around it. And in this case, I'm sort of using my foot as a guide. It's got that nice rounded little darning foot on the machine, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how closely you follow your other lines. You want to sort of echo them, but you're just giving it a little bit of dimension. So I wouldn't get too caught up on it if it's not perfect. There's no perfect here. There's a little bit of a gray shading down there that I tried to follow. I don't know if I did such a great job at that, but again, this is a learning piece, and so we're not going to get too hung up on it. You know what, I'm going to stay right here. I'm not going to go inside of this area over here right now because I want to jump up and show you what I would do from here. Once I've finished, I'm just going to take, just like with any other stop, a couple of stitches in place. Now we can pull the threads up and clip them and start again, but I'm just going to jump over here to where I see I marked my inside cloud. I'm going to jump over to the nearest spot. I'm not going to trim my threads. I'll go back and trim them later because you've got something going here. There's no sense in stopping, lifting the quilt sandwich up, making sure that you've trimmed all your threads. Just go ahead, move a couple lock stitches in place, your needle in the down position, and because I did the blue mark inside of here, now I'm just going to try to follow that blue mark as best I can. And again, because that blue mark will disappear, it doesn't really matter if you follow it closely. Just do just kind of get a nice fluid movement going so that your lines are rounded. You can see probably that I'm not following it to a T, and that's okay. I'm in a trouble zone here where I have to look around my foot, so let me see if I can sneak around there and get that done without moving it too much. All right, I'm gonna get going again. And there you have it. So let me just take a couple of lock stitches so I can show you this and trim this off. I'm going to trim the top, and don't forget to trim your bobbin. It's one of a great goal of quilting is to have your bobbin never run out, right? So if you pull your quilt stance top away too far, oops, I apologize for that. Hopefully you're still seeing what I'm seeing. Then you will run out of bobbins sooner than you want to. So try to avoid running out of bobbin. Okay, here we go. Now I'm just going to try to bring this forward so you can see what happens when I use the eraser. Can you see this? This might be interesting, but let me give it a shot. I apologize if it doesn't show up. So I'm grabbing my Clover eraser and eraser pen, and I'm just gonna one quick sweep around these blue marks and watch them disappear. And it's just as simple as that. And it doesn't really, whatever it has inside of there, I'm not really sure, but it doesn't even leave the quilt top wet. It's if you do try to put another blue mark on top of it right away, that too will disappear. But it's nice because your quilt top isn't really wet when you're done. And if this wasn't all crumpled up here, you would see that you just have to take one quick swoop with the pen and the blue mark is all gone. So that is just an idea for you if you had your the quilting inside of your other cloud, you weren't really happy with it. This is kind of just a different idea for getting a different way of stitching in here so that you're kind of more content with what you end up with. Okay, I'm going to cut out for now. I am going to jump up while I have this color on though. I am going to jump up to the top of the quilt and quilt the two clouds to the left and to the right of the panel. I think for right now I'm not going to quilt the small loop, the loop that's at the top of the panel. I'm going to wait and do that a little bit later after the balloons are done. Generally trying to avoid doing too much stitching around the perimeter when you have a lot of other stitching to do on the inside. So I'm going to focus on getting the next installment, getting the balloons, that spring green balloon stitching done. And so stay tuned for that video. I'll have it in the same blog post. Okay, have a great time and I'll see you in a few minutes.